Hello, my name is Dustin Gregory and I'm down here at the DuPont Training Center, and today we're going to talk about drilling and tapping. What is drilling and tapping? Simply put, drilling and tapping would be the process of drilling a hole and creating internal threads in that hole so that we can thread a bolt like this into a piece of steel like this. Okay? Now, when would we ever need to drill and tap? When it comes to doors and hardware, we drill and tap for a lot of different hardware in a lot of different situations. One common one would be mounting a door closure like this to a door and to the jamb. You got a steel door, you're going to have to drill and tap holes to put them bolts that'll secure that housing to the door. And then anytime you have a closure, most likely it's going to mount to the jamb somewhere, and you're going to have to drill and tap holes up into that jamb or in the face of the jamb to mount that bracket to the jamb. So it's very common to drill and tap when you're doing doors and hardware. What do you need to know before you drill and tap? The first thing I need to know is, I got this bolt, but how do I know what size of bit that I need to drill the hole and what size of tap? Well, if you look at instructions, most likely it'll tell you there. Okay, this is a set of instructions from a real common closure that we use all the time on jobs and we install here at the school. And in those instructions, it tells me that the bolt used to mount the house to the door is a 1/4-20. What does 1/4-20 mean? 1/4-20 means this is a 1/4-inch bolt, and there's 20 threads per inch on that bolt. Okay? So I know it's a 1/4-20 bolt, but what size of bit do I use? If you look at this chart here, you can see a lot of the common sizes of bolts or taps, as you will. It says 1/4-20, 10/24, and you can see across there it shows the bit size. Okay? 1/4-20 bolt needs a number 7 bit. I open up my little plastic container inside of my kit that we'll all have here at the school, and I got 2 taps in here. Okay? My first tap says 10/24. That's not it. So that means my second tap, it says 1/4-20. So that's the tap I want to use. I need a bit that matches it. This is a number 25. That's not it. Which leaves this one to be a number 7. Okay? So I got my number 7 bit, my 1/4-20 tap, and a tap handle right here. Okay? Tap handle, got a handle part like a T at the bottom, and then it's got this little chuck at the top that you can tighten down with your fingers after you get the tap in there. So you simply take the tap, insert it into the end, and then you take your fingers and tighten this down just like the chuck on a drill. Now that's ready. Things about the tap to pay attention to. At the very edge of the tap, this is called a tapered tap. And so the threads, they just barely start cutting at the very tip, and then after you get about, halfway down the tap, now you're getting a full cut on your threads. So it slowly starts cutting those threads instead of cutting them all at once. In order to get the right depth of thread cut on this tap, I usually try to run my taps about 3/4 of the way into the steel, or about 1 inch in this case. Okay? So I got my tap, I got my bit, take my drill, I got a piece of scrap steel that we're going to demonstrate on. I'll go ahead and clamp that down. Now that that's clamped down, the last thing we need to think about, or one of the last things we need to think about, is marking my hole. This is a center punch, a spring-loaded center punch. If I was doing this on a door, I would have a template, or I'd have some numbers, so I'd lay my holes out, and then I would take my center punch and punch that hole. And what that does is it creates a small dimple for this bit, the end of the bit, right where it comes to a point, to stay in, and it keeps that bit from wanting to wander around as I'm drilling, and it makes my holes more accurate. Before we start drilling, though, we need to talk about lube. When you're drilling into steel, lubricant's very, very important for the drill bits and the taps. So I have a couple examples here. This stuff here is called stick cut. It's a synthetic paste, wax kind of based lubricant. I prefer this to use on most doors and hardware that I did. I had a little, we just take the saw and we just cut about that much of it off and tape the bottom up, and then I just dip my bits in there before I get ready to drill, or my tap, same thing, dip it in there, and I mean, it lasts a long time. I enjoy this. I have seen this used as well. This is just a cutting oil of some kind. There's lots of different versions of it. It works pretty good maybe for something like this that's scrap, but if I'm trying to drill on the vertical surface of a door here, I put a drop of lube on there, and what's it do? It just runs down the face. And in most cases, that's not very desirable. If it's not painted yet, now you get oil on a surface that's got to get painted, so it's got to get sanded or taken care of or cleaned off. Especially in an overhead condition, you know, it's really hard to get that oil to stay on the bit or on the overhead surface. So I really enjoy the paste lubricant. So I'll just take inside our kit, we got a little section cut off there with some lube in it. So we just take our bit, get a little in the end just like that, find that center punch mark, and drill. When I'm drilling, I want to keep my bit nice and square to my piece of steel, and I want to maintain a steady speed. Most steel bits that we get on the job sites are not what's considered a high-speed steel bit. They're just a normal steel bit. And the normal steel bits, they don't like running that fast. They get too hot. So I'll try and keep it at like a medium speed. There we go. I got my hole drilled. Now I'm ready for my tap. Take my tap, get a little lube on it, and now I'm going to put it in that hole I just drilled. It's real important to keep the tap nice and square to my material, and as I'm running it in, try not to move it around too much. I kind of start out with two hands, steady it. Then I'll back it off a little bit, and then I'll go in a little more. I'll start to feel it get kind of hard and tight, and then I'll back off. And what that's doing is, as you're cutting those threads, it's creating little chips of metal. And so when I get in there, the chips get bound up. I feel it get bound up. I back off. The chips come out. And now I can go in some more. If I was to just run this thing in there just straight through and not back it out at all, most likely I would break the tap. And being that the taps are really, really hard, it's challenging to get those out, to say the least. There we go. You could see I ran my tap down to about 3/4 of the way in to make sure I got a full depth cut on my threads. Release my piece of steel, grab my bolt, test her out. Voila, we got a bolt that threaded into a piece of steel. So, things to think about when you're drilling and tapping. You need to know what size of bolt that you're going to be putting into the steel. You're going to need to find out what size of bit you need for that particular bolt and that tap. In our case, it was a 1/4-20 bolt and a number 7 bit. Okay. In the classroom, we actually have written down what size of tap gets what size of bolt that we're using here. Okay. Once you know the size, mark the location with the center punch. Okay. And using some lube. Whatever we're going to use here, we got a couple options. And lastly, safety is one important element to all of the construction that we do, you know, on the job. And when you're drilling and tapping with steel, the main hazard, I should say, is getting debris in your eye. And I don't know if anyone's ever gotten metal in your eye before, but it can be pretty bad. Okay, so some things you can do to help yourself with that. A lot of people might have a door like this, and they're drilling overhead into the jamb, and steel's just raining down everywhere. There's two things. It's hot, it's getting on your skin and burning you, and it's most likely coming down, bouncing off the drill, and coming at your eyes. Even if you have eyeglasses or a face shield, there's still a real high probability of getting steel in your eyes. So I prefer to do one of two things. You can, when you're drilling with your drill here, I've marked my hole, I get my bit lined up, if I can get my eyes above where I'm drilling, I won't be getting debris in my eyes, or the probability of it. I mean, how can it fly up into my eyes? It's really low, right? Or if you wanted to, I've done on lots of jobs where I took a small box like this, taped the bottom up, remove the top, and have a small hole in there. And when my bit goes up into there, I have the box up tight to the jamb. So the shavings that come off of the bit fall into the box for the most part, and that's another way that you can minimize your exposure on the safety end of things. Eliminating the hazard is almost always the best way to go about it. Well, thank you for learning about drilling and tapping, and hopefully you can take this to the job site and put it to work.